Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. And I want to welcome everyone who's joining us in the room today, and also everyone who's joining us online. And I know there are many people with us online. My name's Eve Patten, and I'm director of the Trinity Long Room Hub, which is Trinity's Arts and Humanities Research Institute. And like many of you, we're still on a bit of a high after the terrific launch on Monday in Dublin Castle of the Beyond 2022 Virtual Treasury project led by Peter Crooks with his team. That event was so inspiring and a real definition, I think, of how creativity and imagination can bring things back to life and make things visible again that we thought had vanished. And I think it's very appropriate that in the year that we're marking the centenary of Joyce's novel Ulysses, that wonderful piece of work that makes visible again in 1922 the lost Dublin of 1904, we have such an inspiring project that has given us back something that we thought was lost to memory and lost to history forever. So I want to open with congratulations to the Beyond 2022 team on a really remarkable piece of work, which I know has made Trinity proud and certainly made me proud. But it's also been the context for what we're going to be talking about today at this event, Reverberations, Memory, Art and Archives, because that idea of making things visible has also been behind the Artist in Residence project that has been a companion piece to the virtual treasury recovery. We were very fortunate when the Minister for Culture, together with the Decade of Centenaries, set up an Artist in Residence scheme, and we were even luckier when the Trinity Long Room Hub was asked to host a very special artist in that context, and that's Mairéad McClean, who you're going to be hearing from today. Mairéad has been embedded with the Beyond 2022 project and the Trinity Long Room Hub for the best part of the last year, and she's been exploring creatively the reconstruction of the Public Records Office. When Mairéad came to us, it was challenging to think about how we would accommodate an artist who works predominantly with film, with video, with sound and photography as her primary media. But I could see immediately that one of the themes that Mairéad is preoccupied with spoke very clearly to us, and that's the theme of memory itself and how we make memories visible in various forms. She is, as many of you will know, a highly accomplished and acclaimed artist. Mairéad's work has been shown in galleries and museums across Ireland and abroad. She has spent time already working with museums on collaborative projects, including in 2011 with the Ulster American Folk Park in Omagh, and I know, Mairéad, that's very near where you're from, in fact. And she's also worked with the Museum of Country Life in Mayo. That was in 2015, where she collaborated on a film with a group of migrant women, and I hope we've time to hear a little bit about this past work. Mairéad is the winner of several awards and prizes for her art, and her work is held both by the National Collection of the Irish Museum of Modern Art and also by the Arts Council of Northern Ireland. And I'm very pleased to say that this coming October, Mairéad's first solo show on the island of Ireland is going to open in Belfast's contemporary photographic gallery, Belfast Exposed, and this is going to be part of the 60th Belfast International Arts Festival. So we'll look forward to that. I want to say as well, before I hand over to Mairéad, that the time she spent working with us has been really inspiring for me personally. I met her work, I suppose, last year when her film A Line Was Drawn became part of our commemorations around the partition of Ireland and the work we were doing around that. And I think that the current work, The Nick of Time, will continue to speak to many of the disciplines and many of the discourses which my colleagues across the arts and humanities in Trinity are engaged in. I know as well that many of you in our audience will have questions or thoughts for Mairéad after you've seen something of her work. And we hope to tease out some of the themes that she's been dealing with in some discussion a bit later on. And I'm very pleased for our discussion to welcome Orlaith McBride, who joins us from the National Archives. She's Director of the National Archives. And also my colleague, Angela Griffith. Angela is from the School of Art History in Trinity and Director of Trinity's Irish Art Research Centre. And she's going to be leading the conversation this afternoon. So we're going to come to questions, thoughts, comments at the end of Mairéad's presentation. But what an honour and what a privilege now that the Trinity Long Room Hub can host what I think will be the first almost complete showing of this new artwork that will, I think, speak so closely and so poignantly to the themes that the Beyond 2022 Virtual Treasury project has brought to the forefront of all of our minds. So on that note, I will now hand over to you, Mairéad, with welcome.
Thank you very much, Eve, and thanks everybody for coming and to everybody online. I'm going to take about 20 minutes or so to talk through a number of links and connections from the work I've made in the past to the new work I've been making and I'm in the middle of making while I'm here as artist in residence at Trinity Long Room Hub, embedded with the Beyond 22 Virtual Record Treasury of Ireland project team. For some of you, my talk will feel like a long time. For others, it will fly by, be over in a jiffy, because time has a habit of doing that, running away with us. 1 minute it can feel elastic, then before you know it, we can feel we're tight for time. As an artist who works with the mediums of film and photography and sound, I can make time go slow. I can speed it up, and at the click of a button, I can even stop time in an instant. That golf ball was whizzing through the air a couple of minutes ago. Some of what I talk about will be before your time. Some of it will be referencing now, like this moment. That's for me. And I'm hoping there will come a time where you might recall a moment from this day. One of the first pieces of text-based artwork I had published after finishing my postgraduate studies at the Slade School of Art in London was a contribution, a kind of 2-page spread for an artist catalogue in Bremen, Germany. It must have been around 1994, and I don't remember the full ins and outs, but I do recall being taken by the idea of making a story using sentences from the thesaurus. I had found it so interesting that a thesaurus contained not only variations of meanings of words, but it also offered substitutes and examples of all the ways you could use the same word in different sentences. For this work, I chose to use words associated with the measuring of time. I think I have a copy of this book somewhere, but we all know how easy it is to lose archival material. However, as I'm currently retain memory function, just about, and I still remember the work, at least the concept behind it, and as this is an art project, not a history project, I can recreate at least produce a substitute from the words found in an online thesaurus last night to mimic the original to show you today. Monica couldn't tell the time until she was 13. She raced over and hugged me. "Don't dilly-dally, hurry up." There'd been a bad accident on the motorway and traffic was crawling. I crept downstairs, hardly making a noise, and ambled to the window. I was surprised to see that dilly-dally was a measure of time. It sounded like a make-up kind of word to me, not really real. It means to dawdle, coming from the French dallier, meaning to amuse oneself slowly. But I knew it from the line of a song. My old man said, follow the van and don't dilly-dally on the way. And I'm sure all of you will be singing that as you leave today. The melody of that song had entered my brain into the echoic memory stores. I read somewhere that it takes about 4 minutes in total to send a sound for processing in the temporal lobe, where it then sits available to be called up or recalled at any point after the sound is no longer audible, for as long as we have healthy brain function. This part of the brain, along with the auditory cortex, is responsible for recognizing language, melody and harmony. Could the accents of the East Enders I was hearing all around me in my post-London art student days have triggered a memory of a song originally heard by me as a child and written and sung in 1919? How had it come to my ear? Was it through the radio, TV or film, or through sing-songs? Have to go back one. Lost the way on that one. Start again. Growing up in the 1970s, I shared a bedroom with my 2 younger sisters, the twins, in our home in the village of Barra, County Tyrone. The 3 of us made up a game based on this popular TV show at the time, hosted by a Liverpudlian Irishman called Tom O'Connor. The general thrust of the show, for those who don't know it, Tom would give the contestants clues to help them identify a song. Then he would ask them how many notes of the tune would they need to hear before they could name it. The resident band would play the opening notes and the contestant would try to guess it. But our version was a bit different. Hearing the tune of a song would have been too easy for us. After all, our repertoire of music was known to each other and not that extensive, mostly consisting of country and western tunes, hymns, or the occasional contemporary song from Top of the Pops. So we got rid of the tune part completely and substituted with rhythm. The game involved tapping out the rhythm of the song on the bed headboard in the dark when we were supposed to be going to sleep. So, for example, a clue would be given by one of my sisters would be, this song was played at Mass on Sunday, or it was on Top of the Pops on Thursday night. So while my other sister and I would start the bidding process and who could name the song in the least amount of knocks. I'll name that tune in 7. I'll name it in 5. Anybody take a guess what that song might be? The Lord's my shepherd. That's the kind of music we were listening to back then. The reverberations of the knocks travelled from the headboard through the mattress into our bodies and on into our dreams.
Back and forth, thus producing new distortions. Each movement or vibration sets up new disturbance.
The village graveyard beside our primary school was a place we went when there was a bomb scare. Not always a bomb, but the scare of a bomb. A coded warning, whispered words enough to empty a building. The village police station, the bank, all potential targets. Our headmaster came through the door into the classroom. Chairs scrape across the wooden floor. Small figures, anoract, walk down the hill, dwarfed by the headstones, hunkering down beside the shock, nature's wet dividing line, cut into the earth between neighbours' fields, not of the same persuasion. We wait in the rain for the boom or the all clear, whichever comes first, before the solemn march back to the classroom. Where does the sound go? How long does it take to dissipate? Are there still echoes of it in our memory cells, like those found in the DNA of children whose grandparents experienced the effects of famine while in their mother's womb? Will someone come across the sound in the future, travelling around the galaxy? Which bomb blast was that, they might ask. Sounds like a 1971 to me. Which country did you say? An encyclopedia of booms going right back to the time after the first big explosion. From an article called The Propagation of the Sound of Explosions, published in Nature from Macmillan in 1922. It has frequently been noted that on the occasion of great explosions, there are curious anomalies in the propagation of sound. Usually, there is a normal zone of audibility in the immediate neighbourhood of the explosion. Beyond this is a zone of silence, where the sound is not heard, and again, outside the zone of silence, a second zone of audibility. It is remarkable that while an observer at, say, 50 miles away may not hear an explosion, an observer at 80 miles may hear it distinctly. My invitation to get to know what the Beyond 2022 team, and most of them are here today, were getting up to was through the Zoom online, our weekly meetings, as the COVID pandemic had made face-to-face meetings impossible. I understood their task of rebuilding and reconstructing the lost record treasury of Ireland was a large one, but I didn't know how big until several months in. It was about the time that I started to think about what it means to become an active listener. Active listening is the act of listening attentively to a speaker, understanding what they're saying so you can respond and reflect on what's being said and retain the information for later. It's what I'm trying to do to you now. As the weeks flew by and our online meetings continued, and I continued in the listener role, I wondered if I ever would be able to fully grasp what was being discussed, to comprehend the real scale and size of the building project. Could I understand the many different languages being used and discussed, from Latin through to machine translations via Transcribus, to machine code used in the database? I think now's the time to ask the team. Someone has to tell me what's the meaning of IIIF. You could leave that one for later. Could I understand enough to help me reflect on the process of rebuilding the archive, as well as to see how I might use it in my work? What did become clear was the project for both them and me was about exploring, searching, finding and locating, to feel the satisfaction of fitting pieces of the jigsaw puzzle back together again. In 1986 was the year I left Northern Ireland to go to Art College in London, and I've spent most of the intervening years coming and going, bringing things from there to here, from here to there, collecting ephemera, material objects, books, memento mori, of course for the Latin scholars who are here. Remember that you have to die, attaching invisible threads to those mementos, like a cat's cradle, in each place joining the dots to mark my journeys. Each time saying to myself, I might use this in a piece of work. I am a hoarder, I'm a squirrel, I'm a magpie, I hold on to things. I'm a magnet, I am the attraction, I can't get no satisfaction, I hold on to things. I am a lint roller, I'm a fluff gatherer, dust and old hair cling to me. I'm a fallen apple, I'm a sticky jar of jam even. Wasps and ants feed their bellies on me. I am an emigrant, I am an immigrant, I'm a migrant, I hold on to things. I wrote this when I realised my memories were linked to or embedded in particular objects that I was holding on to. I would recall the memory associated with it, and when I looked at it, when I held it, and when I heard the sound it made. Stories live in the material as evidence. The ink was spilt in the year 1766 on page 6 of the religious census of Cullen Union, but who knocked the ink pot over? A thumbprint was made on the Tennyson Groves transcription of that census in 1910, but whose thumbprint was it? I love what the writer Ali Smith said in an interview in the Guardian newspaper in 2015. There is an association with Jetztzeit, the notion of the now time and here and now, laid out by Walter Benjamin. The moment in which an encounter with an image can explode the continuum of history. She says, when we meet a work of art, and I think of a work of art in a very broad sense, for me it can refer to objects or voices from the past too. There's something about that encounter that isn't fixed in time, but rather unfixes time. The shaft opens. The past and present exist in the same moment, and we know as beings that we are connected. All the people who lived before us, all who will come after us, are connected in that moment. So as I continue to listen and watch to the endeavours of the whole team as the year progresses, the collecting clue upon clue, lead upon lead, like hound dogs on the loose, smelling and feeling their way to the prize, connecting with libraries and archives around the world, with those in charge of public and private collections, seeking copies, replicas, substitutes, relating to what was held in the record treasury in the Public Records Office of Ireland in the years leading up to its destruction in 1922, I stand amazed by the challenge and the ambition. And all this is for what? In the hope that what is found will offer further insights into what has made this place, how the invisible lines of our lives tracked through documents, or tracked through the journey of the documents, or tracked through the journey to find the replacement or the substitute documents over time, can track the story of our lives. We carve out time like the stylus cuts a groove, like the needle on the record, the circularity, returning shapes, like those carved stones at Newgrange, the crisscrossing interconnectedness of the lines, bringing us back to that open portal. Part of my role has been to reflect on this process, reflect on not only what was lost and what was recovered and what will continue to be recovered, because there is still more to find. Once the material is made accessible, readable, searchable, when it becomes visible to a wider audience, it is only then that it can begin to become something else, because this is just the start.
Ready? Bit of that stuff. Okay. So you do that. Oh, let me see it in there. Okay, now I'm going to turn it.
Okay, so I'm going to end up now with a story which takes me back to one of the first public art projects I did in around 1997. So the site was near a very busy Elephant and Castle roundabout in London. So my brief was to work with the Cumberland Museum, which is a very small museum on the Walworth Road, and it actually isn't no longer there because it was burnt as well in fire. So I was to make a temporary piece of art in one of the underpasses and the crazy sort of busy thoroughfare. So this small local museum had been set up in 1906 using the donated collection of Richard Cumming and his son Henry, who lived in Walworth and Kennington from the late 1700s right through to 1902. The Cummings had acquired all kinds of objects from around the world, including ephemera, antiquaries and knowingly fake objects connected to the social history of the local area. I photographed the fakes in the museum, made my own fake objects, and brought both sets of fakes together in an artwork that was placed in the walls of the tunnel. I also produced a small sound piece designed for the vertical water sump house on the other side of the door at the back of the tunnel, right back there in that tunnel. And the sound I produced was of a waterfall that had an intermittent trumpeting elephant who I had imagined had somehow gotten lost on the way to warmer climates. Which, with this sound piece, I wanted to add yet another myth to how Elephant Castle got its name, because so many myths already abound. The show was to stay in situ for about 3 months, but one day, halfway through, I got a call to say the sound wasn't working. Of course, technical hitches, which there's always some. So I went down there early the next morning to check on the equipment, and there in front of the door that housed the sound was a homeless man asleep. As I reached over to open the door, trying not to disturb him, to check on the sound equipment, he opened his eyes and pleaded with me. Not the elephant. Please, not the elephant. So what I thought was just a passageway used by people to quickly traverse from one side of the road to the other, to go from A to B was someone's regular sleeping place, and I had unwittingly pushed a noisy elephant into the room. Maybe that is what being an artist is all about. Thank you. Is that on now? Yeah.
I mean that. I think one of the things that we have to realise is just how giving artists are, and how sometimes it makes us feel, you know, very privileged to be part of what you're doing. It can maybe be a little bit disquieting, it makes us question. And I think one of the things that I found there and I think this is something you're going to find very common across the way today, you're dealing with 2 Donegal women and a Tyrone woman, so you're going to have the northern accent today. But I actually think that's very interesting for somebody like me as a border county person as well, just to dealing with the material that we're dealing with today. But I suppose one of the things that I think would be very interesting for us to understand, and a lot of the questions I'll ask you about is being the artist and the choices that you make as an artist. If you talk us a little bit through your process, the actual making. Now I know you deal with film and you deal with photography and sound, but actually what's involved in the actual physical making. And I see there's 2 things looking at your work. You both work solitary in a sense for yourself, but you also are very collaborative in the way that you go about making your work.
Yeah, and it really does vary depending on how it comes to me, you know, where the starting point is. Sometimes, in the end, the starting point always has to come from within, and even working on a project like this, I was drawn to the idea of working with the team. I mean, again, I think everybody who spent 2 years virtually on their own through COVID, you know, I was ready and keen and wanting to engage with people, and knowing that this project was underway, I just thought it would just be incredible to get the chance to work with the team. So, then it's about, yeah, definitely listening to see what's going on, to see what's happening, to see how that connects with me, and finding that comes through time. It comes through looking and searching for images and sound, and then I would say so after listening to the guys for quite a while on the Zooms, then I sort of started to go off, and I found, because I noticed in that old footage, I noticed that the officer, when the shells fired, and he holds his hands up to his ears, and that was the first thing that sparked my, you know, wonder. I was going, gosh, that's interesting. It must be so loud. What was that like? You know. So at that moment, then I start going off down the road on the sound thing. You know, going, what does that mean? You know, when there's an explosion and what? So that takes me somewhere. Yeah. So that's how that starts. And then once I start working with the material, then I start playing with it and seeing what I can do with it, and that's experimentation first of all. Yeah. And then it's just a question of, again, a lot of creative work where you go over and back and forth and see what else comes up. So that's how I sort of go about it. It's a very organic process, you know. Yeah. I don't, you know, I have in the past scripted things, but I never follow things very well. I will always go off on a tangent.
But that in there lies the creative path.
Yes.
As things are shown to you, as things become apparent to you, that's when you head off.
Yes.
I mean, you can't. So what I'm hearing there is, one of the questions I had actually was in relation to that is, how do you edit yourself? So
yes.
So do you?
I probably do. Again, I have to do. I would describe myself as a slow learner. So I do have to go back and forth, and then I have to read out loud, and then I have to listen to myself recorded, and then by doing things like that, I start stripping things back. Okay. You know, because once you hear yourself in record mode, you go, nah, it doesn't sound right. I shouldn't say that. I'll take that out. I'll take that out. Yeah. So it's a sound. It is very much a sound thing. For say if you're using text and voice. Yes. Now, if I'm using image, I'll do that a little bit more. It comes to me a little bit easier. Yeah. You know, because you don't see yourself in the image as much as you see yourself in the sound. That's for me anyway. Yeah. That's probably just the connection I have with sound.
Yeah, and then on that point, did you get an opportunity to look? I see where you filmed them actually restoring pieces.
Yes.
What was that like? Because I know that I get butterflies every time I go in and I get an object
yes.
that I know that is a historical object.
Yeah. Well, it was amazing. I think Jessica's here. whose hands you see on screen. And I had a wonderful time with her and Zoe, and I hope to be doing a little bit more filming there. Because it is really, it's a very quiet, contemplative space. The weight of history is there, but yet it's just they work with the paper, you know, the materials so carefully, and they spend, you know, a lot of people would ask me, what's happening at the beginning, and that's Jessica making the glue, which she does every week, and straining it, and I found that fascinating, you know, because I didn't realise that when you turn over the mesh, it's all stuck to the other side, you know, it's sort of like a beehive or whatever of honey, you know, so it really felt like that. So I just, all of that, you sort of responding to it just there and then afterwards, only afterwards that I can sort of look at what, you know, what was going on and what we were seeing. But I was very close to Jessica filming, and I like that intimacy, because we don't often see things like that close up. You know, we're seeing it at a distance, we're seeing the worker in the space, and I just wanted to be very, very close up to her.
Yeah, because I think that I suppose one of the things, if we see things in a you know, like a conservation lab or whatever, did the human aspect of the object, did that still remain, do you think? You know, the way sometimes if you're dealing with objects, I know that we go into the library and, you know, there's one set, not this library, not Trinity, but I know when the books were in fire, and if you turn the pages, you still smell.
Yes.
You know, is there that sense, or is there a distance that you feel now that it's being taken over by the science?
Well, when I went to see the original boxes that were in the fire, you know, as they were being, that was a incredible experience, because you really did feel, you really felt that they had undergone something, you know, a trauma, and I photographed them, but I felt very sensitive towards them, because some of the parchment, for example, does look like skin, you know, so it felt it was moving, and then seeing the shrapnel and the dust and the it really brings you right back. I mean, to imagining what that must have been like. Yeah. So. But again, what's different is once they're at a point where they're being repaired, that sort of shifts and changes. And I know some of them can't be repaired. Okay. So there are points where they're just too bad. I mean, what was fascinating when I went over to the National Archives in Kew, the UK, they have a very fancy multispectral imaging lab, and they're doing amazing things where they're beginning to see through objects, through the skin and through to crinkles and things, and able to decipher what's there. So there's great advancements coming. So what we think now, oh, they'll never get anything from that, they possibly could in years to come. So as an artist, I'm looking at all of those kinds of, you know, it is amazing to get access, and that's one of the things that Active Centenary Artist in Residence has allowed me to get access to, these very rarefied spaces sometimes, you know, where you know, I wouldn't be able to just knock on the door and say, can you let me in, please, I want to see what you're doing. So that has been amazing. Yeah. Yeah,
because you've used a very nice term, and I've heard you speak before about where you describe objects as memory devices.
Yes. Yeah,
they have that. And I think in some ways, I think it's very interesting. Do you see a difference between the object that is, dare I say, state-owned, that these archives, versus your own books, your puffin books, or whatever you had as a child, or the things that belong to your family? Do you see them differently?
Well, I sort of see, you know, this is again just a learning process for me as well, looking at what the state holds and understanding more about it. And I have been working with different archives over the years. But what's interesting about what the guys have been doing is sometimes they're only finding bits and sections and not full stories, because the full story maybe wasn't even there at the time, like Brian's the 1766 census. You know, it hadn't been collected in every single diocese, or, you know, if it had, it was only numbers and not names, and there's all sorts of things like that. So you begin to understand that what's there, we can still tell an awful lot about the people by looking around and about, and not directly, you know, Or somebody is writing a report and then they're talking about something else, and then you're finding something, you go, oh, that's interesting, they're talking about that, and I hadn't realised that there was more information in just this report that has survived than the actual object, you know, or the actual thing itself that was lost. So I found that very interesting, because that sort of then brought me round to you just approach the material differently, and that's probably very close to what I do anyway. I look at the material and go, well, that's not exactly how I would use it. It doesn't,
Yes.
you know, I would use it in another way, but it tells a different story. It only tells part of the story. You know, again, say my own personal artifacts will tell something how I'm looking at it, how I'm experiencing it.
Yeah.
Somebody who's an historian will be looking for different things. So, but I do like that, the fact, and I've ended up working with fragments when I went working up with Jessica and Zoe, and I found they have a fragment jar, and I was just going, oh my God, that's a fragment jar full of fragments from many, many, many different documents, bills, finds, I don't know, everything, and it just sort of was like a little world all in the jar.
It's been brought together in this jar.
Yeah.
It's a, as you say, little world. Like that. Yeah.
So I found that quite awe-inspiring.
That links, I suppose, to the term that we talked about the other day when we were doing this concept of kintsugi,
Yes.
which I think is a Japanese idea of where you say reconstructing or bringing pieces back together and making things whole, so that you bring things, maybe just gluing things together or bringing things together to make try to restore as such.
Yes.
But then the question in that is, are you restoring, or and the words we use here, recover, or actually are you creating something totally new? And where does the value lie? Does the value lie in what was original, or does the value lie in what we've reconstructed today? I think that's fascinating.
Yes, and I think the idea that something that was thought broken, and you know, if it could be mended, then yes, it was going to be a lesser version, but in actual fact it becomes a different version, you know, because it has gold seams, and then the glue makes it stronger, it's less likely to break, or you know, we can still use it. It just is different. So I think that's again quite an interesting concept. It's just like that. It's not totally gone, you know, it's not totally broken, it's not.
No, exactly, and I think it's very interesting how some people would look at it. It's about perception then, it's about the audience, in other words, or the viewer or the reader. How do they accept it? Do they link it to its past, or do they explore it for what it is now, and for what it seems now? On that point, I suppose, dealing with, you know, your interpretation and that, are you ever concerned with how the audience reads what you do? Is that something, do you think about your audience, or is it something that you make and then see what happens follows? Or
well, no, I do think about the audience, and I know there are times where I think maybe I'm sort of skirting along a line that might be maybe cause some issues or problems, but for some people. But my main thing is to try and keep it as open as possible, so that if I do touch upon subjects that are difficult at times, that I will allow it to sit for where it is, and I don't want to prescribe anything. You know, I don't want to say. I just want to be able to keep it open as I can. That's how I would like it to be.
I was going to say,
so
is that possible?
Yes, is it possible? I mean, again, I talked the other night about whether or not, if an artist has an opinion, how that comes through or how it doesn't come through. Can they make a work with no opinion? And I would like to be able to think that I could, if I'm working with factual material or if I'm working with memory, that I can just work my way and weave my way around to lessen that, you know, because it is about bringing people in who think that's not for me. I do want to do that, you know. I want to attempt that.
Yeah, because I suppose in one way maybe that you do this, and this is something that I admire, is the how do I say this? The way that you use your subjective material, the way that you use your family, and that you do that quite, and hope this comes across the way I mean to say, quite courageously or quite deliberately in some ways. And why do you do that? Why is it that you link back to yourself? Is it for you, or is it a way to link to the audience? Because I find myself there looking at some of the things there, and I remember as a child watching Name That Tune, you know what I mean? That was great fun. And then the other thing I have to say that struck me, and I don't know many in the audience, was that we used the word shock. I love that word. And it's a word, and I married a Wicklow man, so you had to learn what that meant when you say go down the field and see the, go down to the sham or whatever, which is that drain. These personal things that mean something to you, mean something to your family, knocking on the bedpost.
Yes.
Those beautiful things. How do you feel about that, and how do you feel about how does your family feel about that, and why do you do that?
I mean, they would probably find it funny that they will be watching on there, and they'll be going, I can't believe that she's just told everybody about that game. But I just think it gives everybody here, or anybody listening to this, a sense of who I am and how what I've experienced in my life makes the work.
Yeah.
So I don't think you can say, I can't separate that. Maybe other artists can, but I just think I just have to address that myself, because the links become stronger, the work becomes stronger, because I have found the connection.
Yeah.
I find it along the way, and then the work feels stronger because of it.
And would it be also a safe space to negotiate the political? In other words, that if it is your experience and that of your family, and there has been, major trauma in your family in relation to political events in the North and situation, is that a way that people see the humanity first and then look at the political through that lens?
Yes, I think you definitely have. That's true, because if you can see someone's experience first and foremost, then there's an understanding to to acknowledging or understanding what they're doing because of it, or so it gives it a context.
Yeah, so I think it is important, because we are dealing with the centenary of celebration. We're looking at the very events that formed our state, that distinguished and resulted in partition, divided, and we live with the consequences of that as well. I'd be very interested to think, do you ever think about your contribution to a sense of collective memory in the North, in relation to that? Do you see that as your role as,
I wouldn't, I sort of wouldn't take on any sort of big mantle or anything like that, because I can only, I suppose it's just the way I look at it, is just coming out from my own voice. And whatever that is, I understand that my experience is an unusual one. As an artist, it's not totally unusual, but there's a lot of artists who've grown up in Northern Ireland. But you're specific. I'm one of 12 kids. I lived in a little small village, and my father was interned, or whatever it might be. All of those things make you quite different.
Yes.
So therefore, will impact on what I do and what I, how I make my work. So it's sort of, but that's as far as it goes for me. I can't really speak for anybody else.
Okay.
I can only speak from my experience in that sense. And it's also, the work then is something else. It's just part of what I do, and it will always inform what I do. But the work then is something that I see. All I would hope and I wish for is that work that becomes its own thing, and then I push it out, and then it goes, that's it. You can do your own thing now. Let the work be its own thing.
So do you engage with the critics, or do you engage with responses to it afterwards, or you just let it be afterwards?
Yes, I do, and I feel quite strongly that it does. I can let go.
Good.
Yeah, I can let go of that work and move on. But I always have a total immersion into it when I'm making it.
Yeah.
I get lost in the making.
Well, to great effect, should I say. The other thing, I suppose, in that, and just bring it back to the sort of subjective approach that you do have, because you do bring it back, I mean, apart from the context, but also, is it in that as well you find the universal? You know, that there's...
Yes, yeah, I think so. I mean, again, I talk in that piece about that moment when you realise and you connect to another century, another time, and you feel it. You feel a connection. And I, again, working with the guys particularly here, you know, I know they know that feeling. You know, it isn't just solely, you know, a creative person who gets it. A lot of people will get it, you know.
Yeah.
But it's, for me, it's trying to find a way to link to it in the moving image with the sound,
Yeah.
you know, to bring time, to open up time, to bring people into that so that they can feel that we're not just here, right here and now. We have a past, we will have a future, and what do we, you know, how do we use that history? How do we use that to really move ourselves forward? Because it's incredible. The more you're here, the more you realise we don't really seem to learn very much about what's going on in the past. And yeah, and it's as if things just do. I mean, we can lose 800 years of history and overnight.
Yeah.
And for a long time, it didn't seem like it was a big problem that we had done that. So now, you know, we sort of think, well, what does that mean to a nation? What does it mean when we're recovering something so large? You know, and that idea, and it's funny when you use words, like I said, and this is very careful to say, what makes this place, because when you start naming things, it becomes more problematic. And I think I mentioned that to you before about, I was reading about other areas in Europe that have had contentious borders for years, and one minute it was in Poland, and the next minute it was in Germany, and then the next minute it was somewhere else. And the people did, you know, they were still there, but their border was somehow, you know, their area was somehow being moved around from country to country. So then when a stranger came and said, where are you from? They wouldn't say a name of a country because they didn't know who the stranger was. So they said, I'm from here. And that was enough, you know, just to say, because it can be so contentious. So I just think, you know, you're there, you come from there, you've grown up there, you are that person, you are, you know, and that's enough, you know.
Yeah. So it is. Bringing back to the material things that you were talking about earlier, do you find that when you select the objects that you do, the sounds, the images, the artifacts that you engage with, are you also hoping, though, that others will find other things to project onto them? I know that this is quite a very sort of contextualized situation, but is there opportunities, do you think, that people can read further into that? That, in other words, somebody who doesn't come with backgrounds or relationships to the space that we're in now, or anything to do with nationality, or any of these questions, but actually can find other things within the works as a result of exploring this notion of memory and what that is.
Yeah, I think so. I think. I mean, again, I can never predict that.
No.
I can only go with leaving room for people to come in, and I do that quite a lot with sound. You know, I mean, that is the incredible thing about working with both sound and image.
Yeah.
Because you can show an image and you can play a totally different sound, and then that will bring you somewhere else. It's incredible. I mean, it is an amazing thing what your brain does when you listen to sound and you locate it to an image. And if you, again, when you start making films in art school, because it's different from when you're making them in film school, one of the main things is that sound and image is separate, so you don't. If you do use, like this, say filming and I'm talking and directly in the image and sounds together, that is a convention, whereas say if you're working as an artist, you'll split the two and you'll do completely different things. So that leads to some other interesting idea, and people who aren't used to looking at that, they go, that's strange, what's that doing, you know? So it's just it's a combination of materials, bringing them together and playing. I mean, a lot of it is experimentation to see which works, but something then will tell me that works.
So it's intuitive.
It is intuitive. And I was working with, I think, I don't know if you saw this piece, but I made it with footage from Grotowski's theatre company. There was a dancer called Ryszard Cieślak, and he was doing these really incredible, sophisticated moves that were, he saw as, it's called the plastiques anyway, it's all comes with yoga sort of kind of thing, articulation of the spine. But as he was moving, and it was a silent piece of work, and then I thought that I would bring in the sound of a tight elastic band being hit as he moved, so I was cutting this sound, and it just totally transformed the image. You know, but I had the idea, because I looked at it and that sound came to me, so that's just how it works for me.
Yeah. The tension of the body represented by that snap and tension of the elastic. Yeah. Absolutely.
So then you started, and you know, you're talking about collaborating with others. I collaborate with the material.
Yeah, so it is. I was interested. Do you draw?
I do draw as well.
Yeah.
I do.
Were any of the images that we saw today?
No, it's just one or two of them were collaged images. With the guy trying to hold the jar to catch the girl.
Oh, right.
Seen that one? Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Sort of things like that. Photo collages.
But for you, the act of drawing as well as in the act of collecting and collating and putting things together in that way as well.
Yeah.
So it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it is. I think might it be a good time that we bring in, so what I'd like to do is to invite Orlaith McBride, of course Director of the National Archives, to join us. Who's here? Take over the mic. And I suppose one of the things that I was thinking about, you know, in terms of the historian in us, and I have to say, I suppose I skirt both worlds. I went to art college for a while as well, and I suppose as the art historian I kind of do both. But I understand as a historian that we gather knowledge and we look for evidence, this idea of finding evidence, things that we can prove. And I wonder, do you see a correlation or a distancing between what Mairéad is doing and what you do?
Well, I think from an historical archivist, do you want me to hold it?
Here, actually, I'll do that.
No, it's okay. No, I'll rest it.
Is that okay?
Is that okay? Can people hear? Your question was, and what was your question?
Well, what I was saying is that our job as historians is to gather evidence, to acquire knowledge, to sort of prove, to do things in a very sort of, dare I say, factual way, in a sense, that we look for that evidence. Is there a correlation, though? Is there any opportunity for creation within that? And what Mairéad is doing?
Yeah, I think so, because I think in a way you collect evidence of the past in the present to help you to understand the future. And I think that that's what artists do also. You know, they look at the world around them, the world before them, the world that they're presently in, to create something that they will put into the future and see where it goes. So when we last year were looking to again engage an artist to come into the National Archives, I was very conscious of that archives are about the written, the documentary, the evidence is very clearly in the record. And you know, we have loads of wonderful maps, etc., in the National Archives, but predominantly they're written records, and very much the official records of a state. And the process that the archivists undergo, I am not an archivist, but the process that the archivists go is very much, it resonates with the process of a visual artist and of a contemporary artist. And I was really interested in how a visual artist would come in and observe that process that the archivists undergo as they work through those records, and then to see how a visual artist might respond to that. Because archivists are not there as historians. They're there to undergo a process that will ensure that records are conserved, preserved, and then made available. So for them, the authenticity of the process and the evidence, which is the record, is fundamental to the very existence of the institution. And what's really interesting is if you subvert that, or you supplant that with an artist coming into that process, how does that artistic process actually almost subvert that which the archivist is doing, which is about trying to maintain the integrity, the authenticity, and making that available to the public without there being any change in the transaction from the original record to what's available to the public. But actually you put an artist into that process, and what might that look like in terms of how an artist might change their perception. So it was really about opening up the artistic process to a visual artist in particular to see what that artistic lens might reveal about the archival process and the form that is the written record. It's a very long-winded way of really saying that, I suppose, from my perspective, that archives are so bound in the written record that to bring in a visual sensibility into that process and to see what might come out of it was the most interesting thing for me. We have yet to see, we have a visual artist working with us for 2 years. John Beattie.
Oh, John Beattie. Oh,
yeah.
right. Okay.
So John's with us for 2 years. So he has the luxury of time. So he has literally spent 1 year, and I don't think he's here, is he? No. He spent 1 year, I think, being fascinated by that archival process. I mean, he just follows archivists around in warehouses, they're in different storage rooms, up in the conservation studios, down the reading room. He's really interested in the process. So wherever that will take him as a visual artist, but there's a beautiful piece in our reception at the moment, which is, in many ways, I see it as a visual homage to the work of an archivist. So it'll be interesting to see then how that homage moves into the world of John's own creativity, rather than at this point there's maybe a reverence to the profession that is the archivist and the institution that is the National Archives. But it'll be interesting when John pushes that further into his own artistic practice and what comes out of that process.
Yeah. You'd hardly be surprised at an artist who's fascinated by process. Even if it is someone else's process. Yeah. Because, I think we're so used to, and anybody who's involved in the creative arts, or anybody, again, who's an archivist or working in libraries and so forth, is that when we engage with the artwork, it's finished, it's presented, it's done. If we walk in and we ask for an archive, somebody hands it to us in a folder and we just accept it as it is, or we see it now on a digital screen. So what do you think about what Orla is saying about that idea of process and engaging and seeing that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what an awful lot of, there's plenty of artists here today who will attest to that. They just need to know almost, that's just to get under the skin, to understand, and then they take cues along the way, and then, as I say, they may take it in many different ways, but they definitely need to do that. And say getting access, which John has, to the back end to see how all that works it's amazing. And I think that's what's so wonderful about the Decade of Centenary Artists in Residence. It's such a great initiative, and it'd be brilliant if there was an awful lot more opportunities for artists to be linked to institutions.
I think certainly within Trinity it's been a very, very positive experience anytime that we've had artists working here, either as students but actually being here as an artist residency as well. And I think what it does is it allows the artist to create, which of course is very important for them, but it also makes the institution reflect on itself and what it does. And I suppose I would ask you just, Orla, dare I ask it this way, but what value do you think when John has finished his work, when John Beattie's finished his work, or any artist has finished their work, do you think they have a contribution to make to the history, and the way that it may be reviewed in years to come, or even in the near future, and actually to the institution? Do you think it will impact on the institution and how it does its work?
Well, I guess those are two questions.
Two questions, yeah.
So I think the second one, which is about the institution, absolutely. Because I think what John has done, even in the work in progress that he's created in the foyer of the National Archives recently, we and the archivists, all of the staff, administrative staff, the service officers, etc., he's reflecting back to us his perception of what it is we as an institution do. And that makes us think differently about what we do, because we may not, there are, official narratives, accepted narratives, inherited narratives, and then you see a narrative reflected back to you through the eyes of somebody else. They can be an artist or not, and it makes you think differently, or think about what you do, and contextualise it perhaps in a different way.
Yeah.
So I think that's really important for us. There's also something really simple in it as well, which is about people taking pride in what they do, and that if somebody from outside comes in and looks at what we do and places a value on it, then it makes us think very differently. And there's a pride and there's a respect that someone is showing to your work and to the institution, and that's really, you know, there's a validation in that I think is very important. You know, particularly for institutions like the National Archives that are institutions of the state, but yet sometimes might feel they've been almost forgotten by the state.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really important, that's been a really important journey for us in the National Archives. And then your first question, Angela, was in relation to...
In relation to the history, like, do you think the engagement of the artist...
Yeah, I do, and I think...
impact on that?
And it will be difficult to, I mean, I can't say now, just as we're only 1 year into a 2-year residency with John, but I can reflect back on previous, when I was the director of the Arts Council, and we did Art 2016, which was 2016.
Of course, yes.
So that was 100 years after. And as part of the research piece, we were looking at, well, what did 1966 look like? And you know, what would, and the official narrative was very clear. Some of the the leaders were still alive, so it was dealt with in a particular way. And we were very clear when we developed our programme, which was an open call. It was open to artists to respond, and in particular one that I always remember, which is a dance project that Fergus O'Crahur is a contemporary dancer, and he was particularly interested in Roger Casement. Anybody will know that, you know, Roger Casement, in terms of you know, a peer, a revolutionary, a queer, that you know, that the homosexual was whitewashed out of the official narrative. That was our understanding of our commemoration of Casement in 1966. So Fergus was really careful that he wanted, through dance, to explore the revolutionary, the politician, the peer, but that queer, and he wanted to almost give Roger Casement back his homosexuality within, you know, and he was able to do that through the artistic process in a way that history would never have, in 1966 certainly, the historical commemoration would never have allowed that to happen. So I think that artists, so we may talk about Casement, we might remember Casement, but that exploration of the gay man that was Casement may not be as revealed in the same way through the historical review as it might be through the artistic.
Yeah. So the fact as well is that an artist is able to deal with these themes in a way that the institution may not have been able to do so. But do you feel that it will open the door for the institution to make progress in this area, or to develop new ideas, new policies that will be more inclusive?
Wonderful.
And much, that would be what we'd hope from this as well. If I was saying that this isn't this sounds like a job interview or your evaluation, but can I ask you? But asking you though, Mairéad, what do you think your contribution to Trinity has been? Because we're putting you on the spot.
I would leave others probably best to answer that than myself.
But you'd have a sense of it though. Like, how do you feel you worked within a space like this, the academic space?
Well, I guess because it probably wouldn't have been, if COVID hadn't have been here, I would have been in the space more, you know, and all of that. So that was different. I think my connection was through, you know, the members of staff that I was dealing with, and not only the historians, but the archivists, and because this project is very broad, it goes right across into the Adapt Centre, and so I was touching, getting my feelers out, finding out what was going on in many different places. So, as to how they would see my role here as a different thing, I suppose, how I feel my position. But I in terms of, you know, I think the hub is all about learning,
Yes.
and not only, you know, it's me learning and them learning from having someone like me there. And I'll say, I'll let Eve say a few things about that.
And us learning. It's very much, I can put myself in that. This, Mairéad, thank you so much. Orlaith, thank you so much for your insights as well. It was, I think, needless to say, and I think we're now recorded for posterity, I think this has been an amazing project. I think there's a lot to be said, just for your residency here, but also the other residencies that are happening around the city and across Ireland. And I also think it has been an incredibly important platform for our artists. I think that's what's very important, and I think people will get to engage and learn of artists in a way that they haven't maybe up to now, or you know, that, and also to bring it to wider audiences in that regard as well. Yes. So thank you very, very much. And I'll hand over now to Eve.
Thank you very much, Angela. Please stay where you are, Orla, Mairéad and Angela, because we have about 15 minutes, and I know some people in the room would like to ask questions or to make comments at this point, and we may have some questions online as well. If you'd like to ask a question, you might also just want to introduce yourself and explain what your connection is, if there is a connection. I know we've several people with us who've been involved either with the Beyond 2022 project itself or with the archives, or who are visual artists who may have interesting contributions. So please, everyone, relax and in your own time. Are there any questions? And I have a question at the very back. Loud as you can, please.
All right. So you've taken us through time, present and past.
Yes.
And hopefully to the future.
Yes.
And you're trying to get us a memory of a voice from our ancestors, and a memory of a voice or a picture of our ancestors.
Yes.
And I do that myself as I go back through the generations that I have. And I have to get to Bagnallstown, I have to get to Monaghan, I have to get to Offaly and Rahan, and I have to get to Wexford. And I have no voice of my ancestor. And I have no picture of my ancestor. But what I do know is that we have an 1801 census record, an 1811 census record, an 1821 census record, and an 1841 documentary proof of my ancestors, who might have written it or who might not have written it. That's the only link I have to my past. Hence, I know the only link I have for my future is nothing, because I have no record left of what I'm going to do, just as they have no record left of what they've done, unless I get that piece of paper. What are my chances?
Well, a provocative question to begin with, but I think it'll touch on the questions about restoration that the whole project has had to confront. And I know both Peter Crooks and Kieran Wallace are with us in the room and may want to speak to that as well. I might hold off for a second while you think about that and take a second question or comment if there is one in the room. Yes, so, Katrina.
Thank you all for a fascinating discussion. Just two stories, really. When Mairéad was talking about her use of sound and that beautiful reverberation series that you have, just recently Dermot Ferreter discovered a pension application from a National Army soldier who was one of the gunners of the Four Courts on this day when the famous explosion happened 100 years ago, and who was permanently deafened by it. So his reverberation into the future was total silence, which is just an interesting adjunct to all of that. And the other is, it's interesting to hear Orla talk about the artist in residence. She's the perfect person to be doing that, having been a former director of the Arts Council, so your experience in that area has to be wonderful to have in place for John Beattie to be there. But when I was working in the archives all those years ago, we never thought of the documents as visual objects. They were purely there for content. And I was one of the people who began to publish the reports of the National Archives Advisory Council, and I hired a designer called Jerk Ireland, who was a wonderful designer. And she, of course, didn't understand content. She saw them as visual objects. So we have the Statute Roll of Henry VIII, 1534, which gives us information about the dissolution of the monasteries in Ireland. It's a hugely important document. I didn't care what it looked like. I wanted to be sure you could read it and understand it. She wanted it to look beautiful. She wanted to put it on a piece of blue velvet and sprinkle little things around it. Big mistake. Some of my colleagues didn't take to this at all. But it began a really interesting and fruitful conversation about how do you represent documents as visual objects. We had to think about it for the first time. And we all learned from it, including Ger, who became a very good amateur historian herself through learning to read the documents and understand what they meant. So there's that cross-fertilization between what it looks like and what it means, that both sides of the discussion, if you like, can engage in. But thanks again for
and just on that, Katrina, some of the salved records are, and the Minister said it this morning in her speech at the Irish Architecture Archive, they're pieces of sculpture. And in the National Archives we don't have three-dimensional objects. So before, a couple of months ago, I brought Russ Cavan in, who's a wonderful photographer, to actually take photographs of the salved records, some of which will always remain as they are, three-dimensional, and then others that will go through. Jessica's there, the conservation studio and the conservation process. Because actually, 100 years ago, that's what they were. They were three-dimensional pieces that were left after the explosion. And they are beautiful in themselves. And I think we want to do something with some of those, you know, to almost have an exhibition of the salved records and to celebrate the three-dimensional element of them, not just the moment that then they pass through conservation, because they hold a truth in themselves. And as we all know, the last time they were touched, they were felt, they were, you know, wrapped in brown paper and tied with a string and put in a box, and then they were opened 100 years later. That's how they were left, and that's how they're being found. So that past and the present being connected just through the object is hugely important as well. So I think we've all, I mean, you speak about it, Peter spoke about it on Monday, just even going into the conservation studio, and even the smell still, because 100 years later, some of us are the first people to even touch those records. So you're absolutely right, it is that the visual and the written and for me now, it's looking at those three-dimensional objects and celebrating those as much as what they will say in terms of the written document at the other end of the conservation process.
It's a lovely, reassuring thing to hear what you're saying, but here's the archivist now. We used to call those the cabbages because they looked like cabbages.
Oh, yeah.
And we used to long to be able to have the technology to open them up and read them. And I suppose part of me still feels like that. But I understand where you're
some of them
going.
are so, will never, you know, we won't be able to do anything more. So let's celebrate them as evidence of a moment in time.
Some will celebrate and some will mourn.
Yeah, well, no, there is both. No, there is both, yeah.
But you also suggested technology. You never know where technology will
know.
take us.
Yeah.
You will never know that we'll be able to do and find palimpsests the whole way down and just find it through and read through as well, which would be amazing. I mean, for us, and somebody like me that's interested, I'm particularly interested in books and pages as artworks, and the idea of the physical imprint, the hand, and of course a lot of these records are handwritten. That is the line, the feel of the hand on the paper. It is there for us. It's there for us to touch as well, that real tangible link. I think it links back to what the gentleman was saying at the very beginning as well, you know, that there are these links, the document is there, but there is the suggestion, and even the suggestion of it is there for us. And I think that's something that you touch on, is not necessarily you deal with materiality, but also the, dare I use that word, essences or elements that surround it that can suggest presence or absence, and that in itself reminds us of what was there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks. I think all of us, when we watched Moraine's work, were struck by the unexpected beauty of the burnt material, which it does. It cuts both ways, I think, as Katrina Crowe has said. There's a kind of guilt in indulging in that appreciation as well as the appreciation. Is there another question? Anyone else like to offer a view on this? Peter Crooks.
Thank you, first of all, for a wonderful discussion, all of you. It's a question in a way arising from Orlaith McBride's reflections on placement and how that artist made us think differently about that from the historical narrative. I just wondered, you know, those of us in the project have worked very hard for a number of years to be always collaborative, always partnership building. That's been a huge strength of Beyond 2022. And I suppose just stepping back from that slightly, just personally on this particular day and thinking about what happened, I mean, should we not also be angry or upset or at the very least mournful? I mean, is there a danger that we've done too much to paper over what was lost and emphasise recovery? I mean, that maybe is where the artist can speak, and those of us with other responsibilities can share in a voice that might not come from the official line. So it's just sort of a question that occurs to me on this particular moment.
Yeah. No, and I think it is very important to, because it is a difficult one, isn't it? Everybody else will go, well, maybe that's sensitive issues, you can't talk about that. But the reality of it is, we were left in that place back then, and we weren't able to mourn, and we weren't able to discuss or talk for an awful long time. So maybe this is the chance, and certainly I will hope in the work that I continue to do, because my work is only starting. I've only started the film. I will be doing more work with, across the board with and I particularly want to work more with Northern Ireland, the Public Records Office Northern Ireland, and the National Archives UK, because there is a lot of that will come out in the work as I continue. So it is a very interesting thing to think about, especially on this day.
Thanks, Peter. We've time for a final one. I think we've got one online. Francesca?
We do, but this is coming from Quiva, and you may have answered, but we'll go ahead. Thank you, Mairéad, for your talk and film. How has your ringside view of this recovery and discovery of archives and history shaped you as an artist, and what will you hold on to and bring with you from your stint as an artist in resident with Beyond 2022 in the Trinity Long Room Hub?
That's a big one. I mean, I have thoroughly enjoyed it, and I find it amazing. I really, as from what I was saying there, the magnitude of what, and I say it's not a massive team, a small team, but once a small team, a dedicated team what they can do, and the links that they can make and forge, and everyone working together for a particular goal, it has amazed me. I've just found it so inspiring, and I have been just as committed to making it work in whatever way I can, So I think that's the strength of everybody here involved, particularly Kieran and Peter, who I'd say the four men, and keeping sure we're all on the job. So it's amazing. It won't stop. It'll go on with me for an awful long time.
Thanks, Brady. I want to squeeze in this question at the back, and I just want to.
Thank you very much.
Take it.
Just something, Ray, when you were in conversation in Centre Cotier Ireland days with the historian whose name escapes me now.
Oh yes, Kieran.
Yeah, that's it. Touches a little bit on what you said, but he was saying that really when this year has come up, the politicians come to the historians and please give us X, Y, and Z, and money is no object, and throw out all of that. And I thought that his comment really telling, he was saying it's the artists, he said, do far better than we do and tell it in a way he was really complimentary from it, against himself to a certain extent, which I thought was very wonderful because of the openness that you've talked about and how other artists can kind of touch areas that maybe historians can't. So I just thought that was a wonderful comment that he made towards that work.
Thank you, Ruth, and that's our Deputy Director and our historian, Kieran O'Neill, who fessed up that the artists do a better job than historians, which we always suspected. But thank you very much for that observation. One more.
Yeah, I'm an artist. I'd just like to, I suppose, commend Mairéad on the fact that she took something completely abstract and uncatchable, which was sound. So in terms of product, what you've done is created another abstraction, and I think it's very interesting that you say that the sound could be heard in the location, and then there was a silence, and then you could hear it further away, and maybe we're in the silence place as a historical
Yes.
looking,
Yeah.
and that's why it is so difficult to articulate or to make a product.
Yes, I think that's a very good point, Daphne, and there was something in that resonated. Where does that silence lie in terms of time? You know, because, yeah, in terms of mileage, you might have to be here or there, but in terms of time, it's there's always, isn't there, there's always a period of time where things can be discussed, and then there's a period of time where they can't. And we move on slowly, and then there comes a moment where it is possible, and we've all experienced that in our lives in one way or another, that you can then say the things that you have thought about and that really have affected you. You know, so again, on an individual level, you know, I think the repercussions of what happened in 1922 are felt, you know, generationally. They are felt, and then the next generation and the third generation are surprised to hear, and they will feel it differently again. So, but it's at a point where you have to say, yes, we can forget some things, but we have to remember too, and we have to acknowledge.
And the other point I'd say as well is, I think artists go in and they operate in different ways, and some artists go in and they operate in a very quiet, subtle way that actually you don't see an immediate result. And what I feel from what you're saying is that your results will be further along, maybe 2 or 3 years' time.
Yes.
Because of how you digest.
Exactly. Exactly. And only, like, you know, writing this for this talk, things are coming through to me that I can now connect back into the work, you know, which I hadn't thought about before. So that's how it comes. You know, it will come out over time. Thank you. And enter the work. Yeah.
And Mairéad, before we close, can you tell us a little bit about what is going to happen next? Because I think I can announce that very fortunately and wisely, the Arts Council has in fact given you an award which will enable you to continue this work. Did you want to say anything about that before we move to a close?
Yes, it's fantastic news. I, on Monday, got an email to say that I was awarded project film funding to continue this film so that I can, you know, make just a fuller, more extended piece of work, work more fully with the conservators in all of those locations, and work with the virtual side, which we haven't really just talked about. This is an incredible piece of work in that it is a virtual model, it is a virtual world that's been created, and what you can do, as we didn't say touch fully on it, but what you can do there is that you can put in a word, and it will come up through time, that word, it will move right through time, and it will bring you places where you'd never realised there was a connection to. So I want to do more work with that kind of material, so that will cost money because you have CGI or whatever. So this is going to grow into a much bigger piece.
Well, that's very good news, Mairéad, and congratulations on the award. And I would say that one of the takeaways for me today has been the way you talked about the work of art being able to unfix us in time. And I know that today, but not only today, the whole process for me has been an unfixing, a very welcome unfixing from the day-to-day rushing around of our research lives, and some time when we've actually stopped to slow down and think about the historical continuities that we're part of as we come to the end of the decade of centenaries. And it's just been such a pleasure to work with you and to see the project develop. So we do look forward to the next bit, and many congratulations again. I want to close by thanking Orlaith McBride from the National Archives for joining us, and just terrific to have you with us, and to thank Angela Griffith, who's chaired this conversation with such expertise as always. How could I finish without congratulating again Peter Crooks, Kieran Wallace, and all of the Beyond 2022 Virtual Treasury team who've just done such superb work over the past few years, as we saw on Monday. My thanks to Francesca and the Trinity Long Room Hub team who put this discussion together. And most of all, thanks to everyone who's joined us, all of you joining us online, everyone who's come along for this event today. Thank you very, very much. And I hope we'll see you in the Trinity Long Room Hub again very soon.